Hey friends, it's Jasmine, and I hope that you all are doing well. Today, I am going to be talking about my experience at the Whispers estate. So I first got involved with this trip because my good friend Paige had sent me a message on Facebook and was like, hey, here's the thing about this place called Whispers, and I'm interested to see if maybe you would like to attend this trip with me. And she mentioned that, she would like to incorporate a little bit more of the craft into this experience and that she had been before. And I was ecstatic when she first told me about it. And I was so excited to have an opportunity to check a place like this out, live, in color, in person. She also messaged my coven sister, Sydney, who many of you know here on YouTube, as we've made content together before. And we were all super stoked and super excited to be able to go on this trip together and check this place out. So leading up to the trip, I actually met up with Paige at an Applebee's, and there's a video here on my channel where we were live in Applebee's pulling cards about Whispers, pulling cards about the house and about, everyone who would be coming to the house and who should kind of be doing what. And when we met up at Applebee's, initially, I kind of wanted to talk to Paige to kind of like get an idea from her as to what sort of craft experience she was wanting to have. And so that's why I kind of brought up the idea of these ritual games, such as the Three Kings and doing the Midnight Man, and then also the idea of a seance. And per some of the cards that we pulled there is how we kind of assigned who, was to kind of be with what role. And then also after that Applebee's, which like I said, there's a whole live stream of that here on my channel that if you want to check out and get the behind the scenes deets of that, you definitely can. But after that, we also had like a pre-party at Paige and Jordan's house where we had tacos and tarot, and it was a lot of fun. And a couple of the people in the crew were unable to make it because trying to get a whole bunch of adults, let alone witches or magical folk together at one time in the same space is a bit like herding cats. So unfortunately, not everyone was able to make the pre-party. It was also kind of impromptu as well. So, that kind of makes a difference. But most of us were able to get together and we were able to pull further cards about our roles on the trip and, what we should expect and what we should be looking out for. The tacos were great, and I had made some lamb and I made a cornbread casserole. I don't know if you've ever had that, but it's very good. Let me tell you, it's very good. At the pre-party, we were using a RWS Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck along with a Gospel of Aradia deck. For those of you who've kind of been following me on Patreon or on YouTube here, you've kind of seen that I've been working a lot with the Gospel of the Witches, and I wanted to incorporate that oracle deck in our nightly divination for that pre-party. So per some of the cards that were pulled, it confirmed a lot of what I was kind of intuitively thinking about the house in terms of there being, a lot of spirits, but also even more entities. And when I say entities, I mean, things that were never necessarily human, whether they be, from other realms or other worlds, or they be the manifested egregores, if you will, of people's thought forms that have, gone into the house or that have been pushed into the house. And then also a lot of people will leave, cursed or haunted objects in this home. And some of the rules of the house include like no cleansing, no blessing, no clearing, no sending. So it definitely just kind of like harbors the energy of fear, of grief, of sorrow, of pain, of misery, and of discomfort. And that's very evident, even just like walking into the house. The reason why we were doing the Three Kings ritual, the idea behind it was to have someone down in the basement. The basement is where the most entity-related activity is thought to stem from. The basement is very much looked at as a bit of a portal or a vortex where things come through into the house. And so we were going to have someone doing the Three Kings down there in the basement, which down in the basement, we set up our 3 mirrors, our chairs, the bucket of water. You can watch, all of the videos regarding that Three Kings ritual, and I would be happy to make a whole video just on a Three Kings ritual if you would like me to. But the point of having someone down in the basement was to essentially have them kind of sit in the hot seat and be a bit like bait to lure the entities, because during the Three Kings ritual, the 2 mirrors here on your side end up becoming vessels for spirits to possess. And the idea is that you can work with these entities or spirits and communicate with them. And, the witch doing this ritual, it can be very intense. And so we definitely, limited this to 45 minutes. And another reason why we were doing this was so that way the witches who were upstairs in the seance room, so in this house, you have, these multiple levels of this house. You have the basement, the main floor, the upstairs. There might have been another floor and then an attic or so. And the seance was going on in the attic. So that meant that from the start of the Three Kings ritual, they had 45 minutes to leave me down in the basement tied up, doing the Three Kings, go upstairs, go up to the seance, and, communicate with the spirits of the dead as best they could. Because, I think a lot of what happens at this house is like the entities of this house very much are like very controlling and very possessive. And I feel like there's several entities kind of fighting for kind of a master puppeteer position, if you will. And, I don't expect myself or any witch who were to be there to be able to hold all of the entities completely down in the basement. That's not necessarily the point, but the idea was to have as many in the basement as possible, so that way the seance would be undisturbed. So my first impressions getting to the house was that it was a very large house and it looked very plain. It looked like an older home, but there really wasn't a whole lot to the house. It seemed kind of just regular, and it even kind of blended in with some of the other homes in the area. So it didn't really seem super out of place. It didn't really seem super weird, to me at least, until we actually went into the house. Aside from the weeping angel statues outside, like near the front entranceway, that felt a little unsettling. But the energy didn't really start affecting me until we went into the house. And then once entering the physical home, it was like night and day.
Guys, welcome to Whispers.
I'm avoiding whispers.
I mean, the inside of the house does not at all look like it would match the outside. And I thought that was really interesting. So going inside the home, I loved looking at all of the antique, architecture, furniture, and the vintage, fixtures of the home. It's definitely beautiful in a very eclectic sort of way. And it kind of struck a little bit of a chord with me, because I was just like, this is a really beautiful home. And I just love interior design anyway. And so, seeing how spaces are decorated just very much fits my fancy. So I was excited about that. The staircase was gorgeous. That was one of the first things I noticed, because when you first enter the home, there's a big staircase right there, a wooden staircase that is a little treacherous, but it's gorgeous. And then also they had a parlor room to the left, where I think the entity Big Black is supposed to reportedly appear. And then also I believe there was a house fire in that portion of the house, and you can still see some of the fire damage. But that room is also beautiful. The dining area is where we kind of set up. We also received a tour of this home before we really got into doing what we were set out to do and why we were coming to this house. And the tour was very informative. We walked through the whole house and, you know, we're given information about the various spirits,
electromagnetic fields that won't go off unless something with energy,
entities and occurrences that had happened in this house. And also we were told about some incidents that had happened in this house, like people being pushed down the stairs, and there was one girl who had like her eyeball like rupture, and like just like really intense, you know, things that have happened in this home as kind of like a forewarning. I believe we also signed a waiver as well.
In your case, please hold on to the handrails.
While we were there before the tour started, you know, we were directed to where flashlights were and where some investigating material was in case we wanted to use any paranormal investigation tools.
You're welcome to use our mag light unless you have your own. I'm sure you have your own. Please use flashlights. There's parts of the house that are so dark and there's no electricity. You can't really go anywhere without a flashlight.
So after the tour, we then went ahead and started setting up for the activities that we had planned. I kind of thought that it would be a better idea for us to get everything set up for the Three Kings ritual and everything set up for the seance before we actually started anything. That way, once the timer had been set and the Three Kings ritual had begun, they didn't have to go up there and, you know, set anything up aside from, you know, creating the astral space through incantations and invocations and evocations, but they wouldn't have any physical stuff to necessarily set up. So I went down into the basement and I had some help from Josh, who, you know, helped bring the tub of water down for my feet, and we set up the mirrors and we set up the chairs and we got everything ready for the Three Kings. And leading up into this point, I had a little bit of apprehension, but I think that was just kind of like nerves in general that, like, you know, you're going to feel. And also I was kind of picking up on the vibe that, like, I felt very much like I was going into a space that did not want me there and that also was not happy to see me. So I think that anyone in that sort of environment would feel a little unnerved, but this is what the cards had ordained for us all to do, and I was the one who was selected to do it, and I did. So once again, my point of doing the Three Kings was to try to attract as many entities as possible to me, to communicate with me and to show themselves within these mirrors, and hopefully to entertain them long enough for the witches up in the seance room all the way in the top of the house. Remember, I'm in the bottom, so like as above, so below, if you will. I'm at the very bottom. I'm at the root of this house. And the rest of the witches are up at the crown of the house in the attic doing a seance, and their mission was to try to communicate with these selected spirits that we had chosen and to try to understand their story a little bit more, and also to communicate with them and see if there was anything that we could do for them. Now, I was left alone down in the basement during the Three Kings ritual. So when everyone came down, there was a whole ritual done, and invocation said,
like a moth to a flame.
Like a moth to a flame.
Come play her game.
Come play her game.
We conjure the untamed.
We conjure the untamed.
And then I was left down in the basement by myself, of course, in the pitch black, aside from the light of a candle flame, one candle flame, hands tied, you know, behind my back, like so. And I'm to gaze into the mirror directly in front of me without looking at the mirrors on these two sides, but looking at them through my eye, not my eyes, and looking at them with my peripheral vision. Definitely spirits that manifested within these mirrors and made themselves known to me. And there is an entire video that is definitely going to stay on Patreon. You know, I will be releasing some interview experiences, but the main video of this is just so explicit and not suited for work if you know what I mean, to where it's just not going to be released to YouTube. I don't know if I even could release it, but it will be a Patreon exclusive video. So if you're interested in actually watching the experience unfold down in the basement, you can do so over on my Patreon. After I was left in the basement, like I said, tied up to this chair in this ritualistic space, everyone went upstairs. And I remember kind of being put under, if you will, in the sense where I remember them all doing the invocation. And I remember kind of like gazing into this mirror. And part of this ritual requires, a certain extent of disassociation. So if you are someone who struggles more with disassociating, this might not necessarily be the ritual that would be, easiest for you, because you really do need to be able to disassociate and put yourself into a bit of a trance-like state in order for this to be truly successful. Then once everyone else had gone upstairs, Kat was our middleman. Now the middleman is there to essentially create a little bit of a barrier and a secondary layer of protection. So while I'm down in the basement by myself, Kat is on the main level of the house by themselves, also in the pitch black, aside from having their flashlight, and they are to basically walk around the main level of the house for the duration of this event.
Cards picked me to be the middleman, which I was totally fine with. I thought. What I did not realize when I agreed to be the middleman, how much I would hear from the basement. Jazz chanting, but it didn't sound like her. She has a very distinctive way of speaking. If you've ever heard it, it's got this it's a lot of drawl. It's not a lot of enunciation. It's a deliberate way of speaking that sounds undeliberate, if that makes sense. And what I heard from the basement was highly enunciated, and it was deeper.
I'm only to be down in the basement for about 45 minutes to an hour, and the seance should only be going for about 45 minutes. So Kat was kind of another layer of protection to where if anything did get out of the basement, they're gonna go through Kat then next. And they did. There are definitely some entities that were able to kind of finagle their way through some of what we had set up. And I think that's to be expected. I think that if you expect to be able to wrangle all of them, especially in a house like this, I think you're just being egotistical and full of yourself to think that, anyone's necessarily capable of that. I think that I was able to wrangle a good amount of them, but I know that some had gone through from my conversations with the seance party and also the experiences that Kat had while on the ground floor. In Kat's video, she will talk about her full experience as a middleman, and I don't have that experience in this setting, so I can't really talk much about the things that she heard and things that she saw. But I know that she had some experiences of her own, and so you're gonna just have to check out her experience video where she kind of talks about, how it was for her being the middleman, the things that she heard, the things that she felt. And I also believe too that this was kind of like her first kind of experience in this sort of craft-based setting. So I think that for her, that also brought an element of interest, is because she hadn't really been in a space like this, doing activities like this before. Also can't speak too much for, what went on in the seance either, because I wasn't there. Now, the audio is recorded and I have listened to the audio and I have talked extensively, absolutely, of course, with everyone who was in the seance. And, I definitely think that they, encountered some of the spirits that we set out to encounter. And I also think that there was at least one entity present in that seance. And, I think that the results of the seance were a little bit inconclusive. And I apologize if you guys hear any banging noises. When I'm recording this, it's right around the time of the 4th of July. And where I live, everyone just feels the need to set off fireworks at every given time of day, typically from the middle of June through about the middle of August. So if you hear any loud popping noises, that's why. I said, I can't really speak too much about what happened at the seance, and I encourage you to look at Paige's video, Sydney's video, and get a little bit more insight there. Also, Jordan, Paige's husband, was using a spirit box. I also can't speak a whole lot to the experience of that because that was not my role. That is not what I was doing. So the experience that I can speak for is the Three Kings experience down in the basement. And some of this is a little bit hazy due to the nature of the ritual and due to the nature of it being a trance-like state and using, you know, the mental prowess of disassociation in a ritualistic ceremonial setting. However, there are some snippets that I can definitely recall on and remember. And I've also seen the video from the Three Kings. And like I said, the main video of this is the video of me doing Three Kings with the audio of Three Kings, with the audio from the seance layered over it. So that is the only video from this whole project, the Whispers Estate project, that'll be staying on Patreon. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm keeping it on Patreon, one, because it's pretty explicit, and two, there is some moments that are not quite suited for work, if you know what I mean. So I will be keeping that there. Some of the things that I saw down in the basement, I distinctly remember shortly after being left down there. Now remember, there's no light down in this basement. It's kind of cold, it's kind of damp, it's kind of creaky, it's an old house. And down in the basement, there's like a partially finished, I mean, just like cement walls, cement floor, and like piping and stuff in the home. But the cement walls are like more like pony walls. So they're like half walls. So you can actually see over the other side there, and there's kind of like a crawl space area. And I distinctly remember towards the beginning where I thought I was seeing hands actually like reaching over the boundary line of that cement pony wall. And at first I was like, oh, we should have made sure there wasn't like a bunch of raccoons, possums, and God knows what else down here in this crawl space. Now I'm tied up by myself in the dark, and there could be like some wild animals down here or something. But then I remembered, you know, pretty shortly after that, that like, no girl, you're doing a Three Kings occult ritual. Those hands that you are seeing are probably entities and not raccoons. And I believe that they were. Also during the Three Kings ritual, and you can see this in the video, on the mirror to my right, there are several points where my face doesn't even look like my face, which is interesting to watch it back because I can remember doing the ritual and I'm trancing out into the main mirror, and I remember seeing my face almost split into this very distorted, almost like not even human-like face with like really deep sunken kind of black eyes and a big like kind of sunken abysmal sort of mouth, and just like a stretched out sort of like face that just didn't quite even look remotely human. And I remember that, and I remember feeling, you know, like I was unwelcome here, and that they were threatening me, and that they were trying to scare me. And I remember feeling like this was very much like a test to me in some ways, of like being pushed by, you know, my own higher power and my understanding of, you know, divinity. And I felt like, you know, as an HP and as a witch, like this is what I am meant to do, and I need to face what is down here and also try to protect my people. And that's fully what I intended to do. Also say that if you watch this video, there is a lot going on. The video portion of this, it's hard to make stuff out because it has such low lighting down there because we're only using the candle. But if you pay attention in the reflections and also the mirrors, you will be able to physically see some apparitions start to appear. And then also part of this ritual, because it is a trance-based ritual and because it is involving disassociation, there's also, I'm sure many of you have heard of like automatic writing. Well, part of this ritual also is going to incorporate like automatic talking. So while you watch this, the voice that you hear, the main voice that you hear in the audio of the Three Kings, that's my voice. And that's through automatic talking. So a lot of it is like very cringeworthy, doesn't really make much sense unless you really know about what's going on. And especially like layering that over the Three Kings, or layering that over the seance and seeing kind of what matches up with timestamps is so interesting.
Brain.
The main voice in that is definitely me, but there are some times in there where I am talking and something else is talking at the same time. And I believe that to be the entity, one of the main entities that I encountered, one of the most aggressive entities of this home, who in Paige's video, I believe Paige actually visibly saw on the porch. There are also times where you hear multiple voices talking all at once. So you'll hear my voice and then you'll hear some other voices, which, remember, I'm the only physical, mortal, living human down in the basement. So those voices, in my opinion, are the voices of these entities that are communicating with me, through me, and also to each other. Also some things about the Three Kings ritual which are still yet to be explained. And watching Kat's video or Paige's video, you know, will kind of illuminate some of this as well. But at one point, I know that Kat felt like they were hearing wet feet splashing up the stairs onto the main level of the house. And initially she thought that that was me because, remember, my feet are in a sacred bucket of water. However, I'm tied up. And trying to get up those basement stairs tied up with your hands behind your back, and then also the chair, I don't know if I could do that. And it definitely wasn't me because I was down there trancing out during the ritual. So we still don't necessarily know what that sound was. And I believe that that was probably one of the entities who snuck up into the seance, who was probably trying to mess with Kat.
Honestly.
So a lot of this is very much kind of a blur for me, and it's hard to really pick things out from memory without revisiting that video again. Do you remember, you know, Kat coming down to get me? Because I remember her feet hitting the stairs and that kind of breaking my concentration of the ritual. And I remember feeling like, okay, I probably need to like let her know that like I'm okay. So in the video I'm like, Kat? And she's like, yeah. And I'm just like wanting to confirm, of course, that it's her coming down these stairs. But another reason why the video is not going to be on YouTube is because during this Three Kings process, my shirt was torn. And so that's not going to be here on YouTube, of course. And I wanted to tell Kat, like, hey, I'm like exposed and I'm tied up, and like basically, can you help put me back together?
Can you like untie me so I can put myself back together?
And you know, she's like a master knot tire, and it was truly a bonding experience for Kat and I. Like, it was just kind of like, and there's been so many inside jokes that have stemmed from that in our group chat. But that's, anyway, we kind of talked a little bit, and Kat told me about, you know, what she had experienced on the main floor and how she didn't realize how much of the Three Kings she was going to be able to hear. So while Kat is walking around on the main floor by themselves in the dark, in this historically occupied home, she is hearing all of the growls, moans, guttural noises, and conversations going on down in the basement, which she said was very unsettling for her. So I remember Kat kind of like bringing me up, and we were laughing, giggling, talking, and we come back onto the main floor at the dining room, and we kind of like all kind of like convened there, and we just like left everything down in the basement. And I remember we then moved like into the parlor, and we kind of like were sharing our experiences, and the folks were talking about like how it was for them during the seance. And you know, one person felt like they got scratched, and one person like bumped their head and heard someone like laughing at them. you know, we were listening to the Three Kings video and comparing how that matched up with what was going on at the seance. And I think to some people, they would just chalk it up to pure coincidence, that conversations and dialogues that were happening all the way down in the basement were matching up so perfectly that it can't be a coincidence to what was going on up in the attic. I think for me, one of the most, I don't want to say jarring, but one of the most powerful things about this experience was the connection that is within our coven. Several of the coven members were in the crew and were a part of this. And if you watch the video where the Three Kings video and audio is layered with the seance, I thought it was really, I don't know, a little bit breathtaking to me that there's a part of the Three Kings where I am doing this like witch's invocation, and then Sydney is saying the same chant at the same time. And this is not something that either of us could cognitively necessarily align. I think that just kind of speaks to the bonds of our coven and us doing protective work, and possibly even a little bit of our coven's egregore kind of like nudging us to do this incantation. And I just think, to me, it's not a coincidence that the incantations were said at the exact same time, almost tag-along style, how we do ritual sometimes, where one witch says something and then it's echoed back by other witches. Because if you listen to it, it goes back and forth during closer to the end of the Three Kings. After all of that, we also decided to do the Midnight Man. And the Midnight Man, there's a lot of controversy there. There's a lot of like who's its and what's its galore, if you will. I could make a whole video about the Midnight Man. If you're interested, let me know and I will do that. However, we had decided to play this ritual game, and so we were sectioned up into pairings of similar height, because you're essentially going to be tied to your partner. So someone like Sydney and myself, we have a pretty big difference in height. And so, you know, I'm pretty tall, Sydney's pretty short. So if we're tied together, she'll probably just get dragged. So it's best, if you're playing this game, to be with a partner who is of similar stature. So I was partnered up with Josh, and, you know, we had our candle, we had our salt, and basically the idea is to conjure up this entity known as the Midnight Man and then escape him throughout the home, where you have to walk around the home, you know, and explore each little area and not let your candle burn out. If at any point in time your candle does burn out, then you're supposed to stop in your tracks exactly where you are and pour a circle of salt around you and your partner and remain there until the game is over. And that means that you've been caught by the Midnight Man. And there are some ramifications that come with being caught, but there are blessings that come with defeating the Midnight Man. Of the way the home is set up, we were not able to follow the ritual completely to a T. And I believe that that affected our overall experience. Some of the windows have been bolted and painted shut, so we were not able to open them. And then you're also supposed to, you know, open up all the doors, which to some extent we were able to do, but I don't think that we opened up the back door. And so I think that during the Midnight Man, I do not believe that the entity spirit known as the Midnight Man was truly conjured. I definitely believe that there was presences in the home. Don't believe that it was the Midnight Man. I really kind of just had a very peaceful experience doing the Midnight Man, where, you know, Josh and I basically walked around the home, and we had our little candle and our little salt, and I think Paige or Sydney might have said it, but it was a nice way to kind of just like close out the day and close out being at the home and kind of like say goodbye to the home. I know that my partner in this ritual, Josh, he was sweating bullets and he was having an entirely different experience than I was. And I was still kind of dragging him throughout the house because I was like, I'm very cardinal and I'm very let's go. You know what I mean? So I'm like, let's get in this room. Let's go through this room. Let's go in that closet. Let's go through that closet and let's get out of this room. Because I'm just like,
I'll be damned if I come in second place.
we were the first ones done. Now, to be fair, we also have the longest legs, so I'm sure that helped. And like I said, I was very much kind of like pulling and dragging like Josh along. So I was like, come on, like, let's go. And, you know, he seemed like in some parts, like he was definitely feeling something. And he's very much like a stoic sort of man. So I was surprised because up until this point, he had seemed very like nonchalant up until we were playing the Midnight Man game. Another thing about the Midnight Man is that it's traditionally played by women. So I wasn't really sure how this experience would be altered playing this game with men. So that's something to also take into account as well. So then after that, we decided to, you know, kind of close out the evening and make our way home, which for us, it was a couple hours of a drive. And I rode with Paige and Sydney and Jordan, and I'm pretty sure that Sydney and Jordan just kind of like zonked out and were falling asleep, and Paige and I were talking about occult stuff and witchy stuff and, you know, all types of stuff. But I remember once I finally got back to Paige's house, got in my car, and then drove another half hour to my house, I remember just being so tired and so thankful to like shower in my own shower and like just clean and cleanse myself and like sleep in my own bed, use my own bathroom. That's always a great feeling after a road trip. So in kind of closing with this, I would say that if any of you are going to be going to Whispers Estates, definitely make sure that, you know, you take a look at the website and you look at the do's and don'ts of going to Whispers Estates. What you can do, what you can't do, because there are, you know, rules that you do need to sign and acknowledge. And I would also think about bringing some food. Now, they are very accommodating with like beverages. They have like a little cooler there, like a mini fridge with drinks and stuff. If you need to rehydrate, need some water or anything. But I would definitely consider, we had brought a pizza with us, and I think that was a wonderful decision because I think we got like 2 large pizzas and some breadsticks, and I don't think there was really any left because we really needed all of that to like help ground ourselves back into the physical after our experience. So my recommendation, of course, would be like maybe bring something to eat. And then also something else I recommend, and this is kind of what we did, is before we got to the house, since you cannot do sendings, clearings, banishments, protections on the property, we stopped at a gas station around the corner from the house and put protective talismans on us and anointed ourselves before getting to the house. And then once we left, we cleansed and banished and, you know, exorcised everything off of ourselves to make sure that we were protected and not, of course, going to bring anything home, which I don't think that you need to be super worried about bringing anything home from this house because I believe that the entities in this home kind of like keep things trapped there. So if you brought anything home, it would likely be an entity and not a spirit.
I can't believe mine's not the longest one. Is it really not? So far, I think it's beige. Makes sense.
So in closing, overall, let me talk about my good, bad, and ugly. I love doing good, bad, and uglies. And I think that, you know, the coven or any of my close friends, like if we go on a road trip or experience something together, they know and they would tell you that I am notorious for being like, okay, so like, what was your good, bad, and ugly? For me, I would say that my good was no one was severely injured. So that was a good for me. I would say also that my good was the night went as good as it possibly could. There really wasn't anything that went terribly wrong. You know, we were relatively safe and we were relatively successful in what we set out to do. For me, the ugly would be the house was very hot and I do not do heat well. So that would probably be the ugly for me. It was not a look, it was not a vibe for me. So for my bad, I think that it would probably be that when we were at the Whispers Estates doing the tour, I was live streaming, and you can go back and watch this on my channel. And when you do, you will see that it's a little bit hard to follow because the video and audio quality is so inconsistent. But I think that that's due to the presence and the spirits that are in this home. And the same thing can also be said about the Three Kings main video that's on Patreon, is that there are parts that are a little bit incongruent. And I think that is because of maybe just the energy of the space or the electromagnetic current of the space interfering with technology. I know that that's been an issue in the home. So that has been my perspective and my experience at Whispers Estate. And I hope that you will check out some of the other experience videos and let me know what you think. If you would like me to make the video about how to do a Three Kings ritual or how to do a Midnight Man ritual game, comment down below, let me know, and I will definitely look into making that. So until next time, I hope you all stay well and live deliciously. Blessed be.